Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And this is a very special episode of Shat The Movies. We are recording it live on Twitch in front of a live audience of 12. So oddly enough, knowing that thousands listen to us, it's much more pressure to know that 12 people are watching us live.
It is. And also, this is a special evening because we are recording this as our first hurricane podcast. So Hurricane Ian is approximately, let's see, it's about 2 hours away, the eye of the storm. Let's see if you can see that. Yep, there you go. We got some good wind going right now. We got some good rain. In the beginning of the week, when Gene said, let's do this, I said, hell yeah, let's go. I said, it's going out to the west. We're going to be fine. Maybe it'll hit New Orleans. Maybe it'll go out to, the Panhandle. I think I tempted the hurricane gods because then every day subsequently, it crept closer and closer and closer to the point where yesterday, the track of the hurricane went directly over my house. It was perfect. So we're recording this. I don't know how long we're going to last. If I keep internet and electricity, it will be a good day.
I, living in Arizona, have never seen red on the weather map before, and I didn't know it went red. So that's goddamn terrifying.
It did. And one special thing about hurricanes that you may not have ever experienced then is the joy of the local meteorologist, who have been relegated to the background for the last couple of years because we haven't been hit. They come out front and center. They're peacocking. They are so happy to share destruction. And to watch them try to tamp it down, to be like, listen, the video that we're going to show you now may be upsetting, but it's awesome. Look at the waves and it's flooding houses and everybody stay safe because you could get killed. Everyone's going to die. It's great to watch TV, but at some point you got to change the channel.
Big D, you've got several people in the chat saying that they hope you're doing okay. They hope you're safe. A-Town is keeping an eye on it as well on the mid-Atlantic coastline. And thank you guys, everybody who's cheering. Costernell 81. Sorry, you have to get back to work. Carlos, thank you so much for your big cheer as well. We're not going to be calling out all the cheers, of course, during the pod. So just know that we appreciate them ahead of time. We have a level 4 hype train going already, which is almost like a level 4 hurricane. So it's very exciting.
And one last thing I want to add to show you how special Florida is. If we didn't always know, it's so special already. Publix, our local supermarket chain, it's really exceptional. They have hurricane cakes. So every time there's a hurricane comes, they have cakes that say, Ian, go away. And it's the eye of the storm and the hurricane. And they sell out every single hurricane.
Late stage capitalism at its finest. Well, each week we take a look back in time to decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all the information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, which 17 people are on right now, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
Gene, as you've said, this is a very special week for some of our most beloved commissioners. The brothers trio, Adam, Josh, and John, have commissioned countless movies. So recently I went through and finally put everything in order, all the commissions, everybody's done it, because I always want to be able historically to give people credit for their support. And even though Steve W. has commissioned quite a few, there's been a couple months of Steve, the brothers, the trio brothers have commissioned 13 films. The Princess Bride, Bad Boys, Fletch Lives, The Silence of the Lambs, The Great Outdoors, Of Mice and Men, Interview with the Vampire, Dutch, Police Academy, which is coming up, Uncle Buck, The Crow, The Karate Kid, and Forrest Gump. So we were very excited when they reached out to us and said, could you possibly do a special commission for the Highland Park shooting? And we were very happy tonight, during a hurricane, to review the 1989 comedy, Uncle Buck.
And Adam is with us live tonight as we record. And Joshua wrote in the letter for this week's podcast and said, greetings once again, Shat Gang. First off, I want to again sincerely thank you for everything you do. Your work not only makes us laugh and reminisce on a weekly basis, but at times like these, helps us both cope and help others. My family and I moved from Chicago to Highland Park, Illinois almost 2 years ago and immediately fell in love with this idyllic community. Amazing schools, great restaurants, wonderful parks and community events, the occasional Billy Corgan pop-up concert at his local coffee house. You know, everything you'd want in a place to raise your two kids. Like many locals, though, that notion of our idyllic community was tested with the tragic events of this past July 4th. I don't think it's necessary for me to relay the details of the day or give my family's personal experience with the events, but I'll just say that we were some of the lucky ones in a heartbreaking situation where I guess there have to be lucky ones sometimes. That said, the Sunday after the events, my wife and I were taking our daughters out for ice cream, the first time they'd been near the area since the shooting. Passing near the train station downtown, we saw a memorial set up with a group of what must have been 100 plus people gathered, surrounded on the outside by religious leaders, grief counselors, and therapy dogs, waiting to help everyone in need. Seeing that kind of response was one of the first times I thought, we're going to be okay. Now, as to Uncle Buck, truth be told, I've never seen it. But it was the only movie from that era filmed in the area that you haven't done, so here we are. My wife was shocked when I told her I hadn't seen it before, so it's looking like it's going to be an in-home date night flick this weekend. Highland Park is and will continue to be an amazing place to live and raise your kids. While the events of July 4th were tragic, this community's response has done nothing but reinforce the decision that my wife and I made to make this the place we want to grow old together, raising our family. Thanks again for all that you do, and I'll be making a personal donation in your honor to the Relief Fund. Sincerely, Joshua R. Well, Uncle Buck is a 1989 comedy written and directed by John Hughes. It stars John Candy and Amy Madigan with supporting roles by Jean Louisa Kelly in her film debut, Macaulay Culkin, Gaby Hoffmann, Garrett M. and Elaine Bromka. The film tells the story of a bachelor who babysits his brother's rebellious children while the parents are away. Uncle Buck was released in theaters on August 16th, 1989 by Universal Pictures and grossed $79.2 million against a $15 million budget. The film was met with mixed reviews. So Big D, we always ask the question where you were and what your memories are of the movie. Tonight it's Uncle Buck. What do you got?
So much like Josh, I had never seen this before. Growing up, I was a big John Candy fan. I have subsequently become a bigger fan doing the podcast because I think he's underrated as an actor. People think of him as the big buffoon, that everything is him falling down and fat jokes, but he's not. He's got a lot of heart. And John Hughes, I mean, all those movies, that as an 80s kid, that was the movie backdrop of my childhood. But somehow this movie had slipped through, and it was a very pleasant surprise going back and watching it because I could fill that piece in, and it also gave me a little more respect, even if that's possible to have, for John Candy.
When you're a kid, you can really stretch how relevant something is to you. Like, I would look at any car that my family drove, and I'm like, it's kind of like Knight Rider, you know? I looked at Uncle Buck, and I was like, oh, he's like my uncle, kind of, right? I grew up without a dad, but I was rich in uncles, and I love spending time with them doing like bachelor things, because none of them were married. It's kind of a curse in my family. You know, they would just cruise in their cabs, they'd go to Greasy Spoons, we would watch ninja movies together, and occasionally I could like steal a sip of Coors Light. So when I first saw Uncle Buck as a 9-year-old, I was like, fuck, that's me. Like, I'm watching my own relationship with my delinquent father figures, all of my uncles. And when John Candy busted out that giant pancake, my mind was blown. Like, with the possibilities of all the cool things I can eat when I grew up, I was like, I want to be this guy. I didn't realize he was supposed to be a negative role model. I thought that was the coolest guy in the world.
Well, I've now made the connection in the story you've told of your childhood, the memory of your uncle's cab. That you could smell the cigarettes, the way that the seat felt. You could have been in Buck's car. It's that memory. I can see how it ties together, and it's one of those things that's strange to tie that you have good memories about. the smell of cigarettes, but it's one of the things we hold on to.
If you could bottle the scent of tobacco smoke in a car that sat in the Arizona sun all summer and then mix that with just a touch of Coors Light and a mustache on a Persian man, it's
disgusting.
Let's roll the trailer.
Where do you live?
The city.
Do you have a house?
Apartment.
Own or rent?
Rent.
What do you do for a living?
Lots of things.
Where's your office?
I don't have one.
How come?
I don't need one.
Where's your wife?
Don't have one.
How come?
It's a long story.
Do you have kids?
No, I don't.
How come?
It's an even longer story.
Are you my dad's brother?
I'm your dad's brother, all right.
Buck Russell had always been the black sheep of the family.
I'm stunned that I'm related to you.
Until one night,
Buck, we have a problem with the kids. We're stuck for somebody to watch them.
Oh, please, not that.
Can we trust him?
He's my brother, for God's sake.
I won't let him get into that Satan stuff or any of the new chicks. I'll leave that for me. Wow. I'm kidding, huh?
now he's making them breakfast,
Cigar?
No thanks.
making them lunch, and making them crazy.
What did you do?
He's irresistible.
I want to ask you why I'm so attracted to you.
I wouldn't even guess at that.
He's unbelievable.
I'm Anita Horgar.
I'm Buck Melanoma. Molly Russell's wart.
He's
Would you just
John Candy as Uncle Buck.
What does he like to drink? I've been leaving the toilet seats up. Is that what the blue water is? It's not good for him, huh?
Uncle Buck, the new comedy from John Hughes.
You have much more hair on your nose than my dad.
How nice of you to notice.
I'm a kid, that's my job.
Coming soon to a theater near you.
Bob and Cindy Russell and their 3 children, Tia, Miles, and Maisie, have recently moved to the Chicago suburbs. In contrast to the Russells' upper middle-class lifestyle, Bob's brother Buck lives in a small apartment in Wrigleyville, earns his living by betting on rigged horse races, and drives a dilapidated 1977 Mercury. Buck's girlfriend of 8 years, Shanice, wants to get married and start a family, but Buck loves his lifestyle. To quell her dissatisfaction, Buck has begrudgingly accepted a new job at her tire shop.
So from the very first frame of this film, this is obviously John Hughes. It's a familiar shot of someone walking down the street in a Chicago suburb. The houses look like they do in Chicago or all of John Hughes movies. This could have been Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And maybe it was an outtake and they added it in. You got John Candy. And I was surprised to learn he's been in more John Hughes films than any other actor. He did Uncle Buck, National Lampoon's Vacation, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Great Outdoors, She's Having a Baby, Home Alone, and Career Opportunities. And then you get to the high school, because every John Hughes movie has to have a high school. And we get to see West Tier, or I think it's called New West Tier High School. It's in Illinois. And this was used in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 16 Candles. And we talked about in Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs recently, that people think there is a universe, like an MCU, like a Quentin Tarantino, where they all are tied together with the characters overlapping. John Hughes movies, they could all take place in the very same day. I would not be surprised if you laid them out, that Ferris Bueller could be running across the street in one of these shots. Dun, 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 hopping fences, because they're all the same films.
And it's not just the casting and the setting. You're right. It's the same movie. The characters are basically just rehashed versions of the same people. It's so formulaic. I feel like Tia could have been played by Ali Sheedy, right? They're just slight twists on the same people. And it is this idyllic suburban life that he loves to paint.
I almost feel like this is the comfort food of families and kids of the 80s. You know it's not good for you. You know, it's maybe like a breakfast with some bacon and sausage and some eggs. And you know it's not the healthiest choice, but it makes you feel good. There is something about his formula that most suburban kids can just relate to.
And this year, 2022 of Shat The Movies, I feel like has been the year of like the cool car. We've got Ghostbusters coming up with the Ecto-1. We had Smokey and the Bandit, with the Trans Am. We've seen our share of famous movie cars on Shat The Movies. And Uncle Buck's 1977 Mercury certainly deserves its place in the top 100 movie cars. I'll give them that. I didn't remember this movie repeating the backfiring car joke so many times. If you guys haven't seen it recently or have never seen it, he pulls up, there's a whistling sound, and then boom, the car backfires. It's funny the first time. After a while, it's a lot. And anytime Buck shows up, the film is sure to focus on the car. Wait. It backfires. And first time, second time, maybe funny. The joke isn't strong enough to qualify as a movie motif. They made a mistake here. We get it. His car backfires. It scares people. So what?
I don't know. Maybe I know I'm going to get called out because I have a strong stance on don't repeat stupid jokes like Chris Farley running into the glass door. That really annoys me normally. But maybe I'm softening in my old age, or it was just the topic of the film. I kind of liked it, because they changed the sound effect just enough each time. Sometimes there's more of a whistle. Sometimes there's a pause. And the reaction it gets from people only builds upon the mystique of Buck. Who is driving this beast of a car that's backfiring? You can't see through the windows. It's smoky. You would expect this to be something Leland Gaunt was driving in Needful Things.
One night, Cindy's father has a heart attack. Tia, bitter about being forced to move, accuses Cindy of abandoning her father. Bob suggests asking Buck to come and watch the children. Cindy suggests asking their neighbors, the Nevilles, for help instead, but Bob finds they're vacationing in Florida. Buck cheerfully accepts the job when Bob calls him. When he informs Shanice that he cannot start his job yet due to a family emergency, Shanice assumes Buck is trying to lie his way out of working.
So like I've already mentioned, the movie starts and I don't have any idea where it's going to go. I don't know who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist. So we're introduced to Buck's brother, Bob, his wife, his 3 kids. And I have never so quickly just disliked an entire family. Bob is a spineless passenger in his marriage. He's submissive in his role as father and brother. It's clear that Buck's estrangement is because Bob kowtows to his wife, who doesn't like Buck. They cut him out of a wedding photograph. If you found out that somebody, your brother or sister, had done that, you would have to have a serious family talk. And Cindy Russell is miserable. She's a bitter hag. She is a Karen before there were Karen. She's like a 1980s Karen. She is a pathetic excuse for a mother. She's disconnected from all of her kids. She doesn't even know that Miles' hockey season is over. It's terrible. Maisie and Miles, even though I do grow to love them, initially I was not getting their little predictable kid hijinks. It was like a co-ed Home Alone, but they grew on me. But man, instead of a knife, I feel like Cindy is stalking her family with these death stares and condescending tone and just indifference. Cindy is a monster. She is one of my most hated characters, and Tia is well on her way of joining her as a future Karen unless somebody steps in.
I mean, I don't know about hag.
She's a hag.
Okay, but you're right. Think about how different this movie would be if the Russells really loved Buck and Buck just had his own shit to deal with. That happens. That's real life. And I understand that's not the movie we're given, and I'm not trying to rewrite the movie. We get that all the time on YouTube, right? Oh, stop trying to rewrite the movie just because it's not the movie you want. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is John Hughes clearly wants us to root for some sort of love to develop between all these characters. That's the premise of the movie, right? That's what he wants to establish. But for that to happen, we have to actually like the Russells. If we don't like them, why would we want Buck to, mesh with them or to learn something from them?
But there's also no reason given for them to hate Buck. There's no flashback to Buck getting drunk and falling down at their wedding, embarrassing them. Other than not having direction in his life, wearing sports jerseys at 40, and not having like a career or wife, he does not deserve to be ostracized. He does not deserve the scowls he gets. And I'm feeling bad for him.
Speaking of Cindy, if I'm in a relationship and the person I'm dating doesn't like the king bee, that's a deal breaker, right? Thinking about how much I loved Uncle Buck as a child, I think my 27-year friendship with the king bee actually makes perfect sense based on these events. Like, both guys, they're kind of messy. They live in the cool part of town. They wear a lot of jewelry for some reason. They're all well connected in certain circles where you get certain tips. They're both surprisingly good with kids. They aren't always there for you. Like, you'll message them or call them and they don't get back to you for like 2 days, but then they come through in ways that you just would not expect. No kids, no family, no steady job. It's just a dude who does things his own way and somehow manages to scrape by. Just a free and lonely soul. I see that. I connect with that. And this movie review might just be about my childhood.
But that's because you love the man. He's not going to give you anything. He's not going to necessarily benefit you in any way other than that you care for him. The Russells seem to be everything is status. Oh, Buck he's going to embarrass us or he's going to do something stupid. I don't get that. And you're a good friend in a way that Bob is not a good brother.
It's the classic dog people versus cat people thing, right? Well, he's not a good friend because he's not loyal and he doesn't come through for you. And when you call him, he doesn't come running and he's not always happy to see you. Fucking cats don't give a fuck. You can appreciate a cat though, right? I mean, Toby, does he do anything for you?
Occasionally he'll come by and be like, meow.
That's it.
But I respect him. I respect his individuality. I don't need him to constantly be licking my feet to know he's there. He's doing his own shit. He's chasing lizards. He's just chasing other cats. And he just comes in like, yo, what's up? That's Toby.
Well, upon arriving, Buck deals with Cindy's and Tia's cold demeanor toward him and finds himself cropped out of Bob and Cindy's wedding picture. Nevertheless, he quickly befriends Miles and Maisie. When Buck meets Tia's boyfriend, Bug, he warns her that Bug is only interested in her for sex. Over the next several days, he takes the kids to his favorite bowling alley, makes enormous pancakes for Miles' birthday, punches the drunk Pooter the Clown, berates assistant principal Anita Hogarth, and handles the laundry while the washing machine does not work. This movie fails to make me laugh over and over and over again.
No.
But the biggest wasted opportunity is Pooter the Clown. You've got an 8-year-old Macaulay Culkin and a 6-year-old Gaby Hoffmann. They're both adorable. These are some very spunky kids. I like them on screen. And they're in a movie with a drunken clown named Pooter. This is the setup for 80s comedy gold. I want to see this scene. I want Pooter to go in the house and fuck around with these kids. Instead, John Candy assaults a guy for being proud and having a few too many drinks. It's a complete throwaway. It's a joke with no punchline. No pun intended.
No, okay. You're saying you didn't laugh, okay? The movie does a couple times borderline on very Looney Tunes. John Hughes likes to throw in the or like the sound of people slipping. There's a scene later on where Buck gets the door kicked into his face, and you actually hear cartoon sounds of like Tweety birds flying around. He goes through the air, zoinks, and he hits the ground. I'm glad the movie doesn't do that. Gene, this isn't supposed to be funny about Pooter the Clown. This is supposed to show you for the first time that Buck may look from the outside as a complete loser, but he will be there for the kids when they need protection. He will beat up some dude that normally, that looked like it would be an even fight. Pooter versus Buck, both sober. Who wins that fight?
I'm going to go. I think clowns have to have some dexterity and they got some statement. And they go, I mean, the job of being a clown probably involves a lot of physical abuse.
Yeah, there's probably also a lot of cardio involved in entertaining kids for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Plus he had some like Northeastern accent. So he sounded like he had grown up maybe a little rougher. He would have beaten Buck's ass. But Buck doesn't care because Buck's there for the kids. And that goes to the big point that Buck, he is a complete fuck up. He is a 40-year-old man. He's got a shitty apartment with like sports posters on the wall. There's no direction in his life. And we know that Buck is a failure, okay? But I'm glad that we didn't get a nonstop string of just Buck's drunken buffoonery as he stumbles around the house, embarrassing himself and being like, breaking countless dishes. We only got one. And I was glad that instead, Buck turns out he's a good uncle. They called him at like 2 a.m. He had been drinking that night. He's obviously drunk when he shows up. Maybe he shouldn't have driven, but he's hungover. He wakes up 7 a.m. He cooks those kids a giant feast of a breakfast. He gets the kids to school on time. He takes care of the dog. He's even doing chores, even though his apartment is a mess. He fails at something, but you have to give him an effort. He cares about the kids, and he is a better parent and guardian than his own parents in a lot of ways.
Once again, he's kind of my hero. I can relate to this guy. I've held a baby one time. It was my sister's son. I held him one time because everyone had to run outside for some emergency, and they just gave me this baby. I don't know how to change a diaper. I don't know what bedtime is for a kid. I have no idea. I don't know how much of an 80s movie plot a 9-year-old would understand. If you sat me down with a 9-year-old child and you said, tell them about this movie, I don't know what's like appropriate, what's not, or even what they can comprehend and what they can't thematically. But if I had to take care of kids, if you said, hey, Emma needs you to watch her for this weekend, I got to get out of town or whatever, I would do my very best. And I think I would exceed expectations. You just have to care. You just have to want to do good. And he does.
Yes, it's the one piece of advice I give all my friends who are having their first child. Don't try to be perfect. Whatever you choose to do, if you feel it's right and it's in your heart the thing that you want to do and think you should do, you can't be wrong. Don't worry about being perfect. You're never going to be perfect. Just care about it. And you know what? Buck does that. He does that, and he's been shit on his whole life by his brother Bob and Cindy. If they could only see what he was doing and give him some respect, the man deserves it.
After the shit that I threw at Home Alone, I'm famously known for not being a big Home Alone fan. I just think it's not that great a movie. I think Home Alone 2 is actually better.
Oh, no.
I'm going to ditch the script for Gene for a second and say Macaulay Culkin is great in this movie. From a 2022 perspective, you look back on this, you go, oh, Macaulay Culkin is just doing the same thing he did in Home Alone. But no, friends. Remember, Home Alone didn't come out until a year later. So this is the OG Macaulay Culkin act. Like, he'd done some TV before, he'd done some movies before, but his role as Miles Russell, it really set the tone for what he'd be doing in comedies for the next few years. And it's the best example of his ability to just say things the way most kids can't. I mean, we see so many movies where, like, have the kid say something adult. It's really, really funny. And it doesn't work because they kind of just say it like this, and, you know, people laugh, and I'm just sitting there with my arms crossed. When he says things like the dog's a ball sniffer or ready for your sex, it's deadpan, it's funny delivery. You can't hate this kid. And there's a scene where he interrogates Buck with like these monotone, rapid fire questions. I was eating it up at this point. I'm completely in his hands.
Yes, this is the Kevin McAllister origin story. This is how he became Kevin McAllister. And what I like this version of him so much better because he's not so much the Kevin like doing the aftershave. And the screaming. Instead, he is basically like an adult soul in a kid's body. He's sitting there observing the world around him. He's more intuitive than any of the adults give him credit for. And he's got a line where Tia is making out with Bug. And he goes, he doesn't go, oh, look at my sister. What's she doing? He goes, that's a stupid thing to do during flu season. I loved it. He's sitting there with the mail slot on the door looking out, and he's interrogating Shanice, and he's like, I need some ID, please. Can you take it out of the holder and pass it through? He's great.
Can you explain something to me about that scene? When he looks through the flap, there's like 3 dudes.
I think
is he imagining that?
I think it was his worst case dream. He's home alone, and he thinks, I thought maybe at first it was a bad cut or I'd hallucinated it. But yes, it was 3 guys. Again, maybe this is the origin story of Home Alone, and it was really, if you Joe Pesci, yep, it was the Wet Bandits.
Whoa.
That would be funny. That would be funny.
This is our third metaverse theory in like as many weeks. It's crazy. Yeah. We got our Dark City, we got our Reservoir Dogs, and now we got our Uncle Buck. Weird. Thank you, Josh, so much for that $200 tip. That was absolutely massive. That got us well beyond goal. So I'm going to match that with 50 of my own. I guess that's not really a match.
In spirit.
I'm matching you in spirit. That's right.
Yeah.
Tia exacts revenge on Buck by tricking Shanice into thinking that Buck is cheating on her with her neighbor, Marcy. The following weekend, Buck decides to rescue Tia from a party instead of attending a horse race, which would have provided him with enough money for the entire following year. He calls and begs Shanice to watch Miles and Maisie as he searches for Tia. At the party, Buck walks in on Bug, forcing himself on another girl. After he finds Tia wandering the streets, she tearfully apologizes to him and acknowledges he was right about Bug. Buck then reveals Bug bound and gagged with duct tape in the trunk of his car. Bug apologizes and is released, then threatens to sue Buck, but flees after Buck strikes him with a golf ball.
So I'm a little bit surprised this film. Again, I came in not knowing what to expect, and it was kind of shocking that Buck's physical appearance, his obesity, is never used for a punchline. I was expecting like Chris Farley. Everything in a Chris Farley movie is based on the premise of fat guy in a little coat. He's falling down, he stumbles, hits his head, he's saying stupid things, he's sweating. None of that is in this movie. Only at the end, I think Bug calls him, fatso or something once when he lets him out of the trunk. It's nice to see that even though everyone insults him for his life, he's a loser. It was nice that for once you could just be a fat loser and you're just a loser.
Counterpoint. It feels a little hypocritical to me to consider fat jokes targeting John Candy as uncouth. They're off limits, right? When he's the same guy who's sitting there and making fun of a woman's mole, like way before the movie establishes that she's an asshole. He comes in there and he's just bagging on her appearance when no one's allowed to bag on his. I'm talking about Anita Hogarth, right? The vice principal. I don't know. It seems pretty fucked up.
Well, I'm talking more that John Hughes doesn't make fun of him. Yes, one character in world. You'd expect one or two people to call him fatso or whatever. That would have been okay. But the fact that he is not a buffoon. He's not like lost control of his body. He's not walking around like a marionette, stumbling around and falling on coffee tables and passing out. That's what I'm saying, that he can be a fat guy who functions and actually has his motor functions and can walk around. John Hughes respected him.
While we're talking about people's looks, I want to talk about Marcy the neighbor. So for people who haven't seen Marcy the neighbor, to describe her, she's what you said, she was like Roseanne's sister, right? Basically.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's Roseanne's sister. She's in like some riding pants. She's got some sort of over the top outfits a little bit in the movie. As a kid, I totally misunderstood this part of the movie, the Marcy scenes. I realized as an adult, she's supposed to be a crazy, overbearing neighbor. I thought she was supposed to be the sexy neighbor, because she's very direct and she's very horny, and she shows up like wearing like equestrian, like riding pants, and she's grinding on Buck's leg.
Yep.
I didn't understand why Buck would want Shanice. Like, wow, she's a sexy lady. I assumed Marcy was going to be his new girlfriend. Like, he moves to the suburbs, he meets Marcy, they're going to be banging. Because Marcy thinks he's perfect just the way he is. He's a big guy in a sweater, and she's turned on by it. As an adult, yes, I see the movie was trying to send another message, but I still kind of prefer Marcy. Big D, I want to get a ruling from you. As a man in his 40s, looking at Marcy, is she hot or not?
No, you're so far wrong. She's batshit crazy, and she doesn't think that Buck is perfect. She thinks every man is perfect. She's going to bang the FedEx guy.
Sounds great.
Buck says to go away. But no, when you have somebody who's crazy, whether it's guy, girl, whatever, whoever your partner is, it reminds me, and I think I've told this story in the podcast, and I got to lower my voice because Emma and Vanessa are in the room, but I think I talked about the girlfriend once who wanted to play rape, who one time was like, hey, let's play rape. And immediately I was like, whoa, okay. I think we've hit our limit here. And I was like, okay. And I kind of backed out and tried to get my stuff because I was visiting. It ended up me calling the police and having friends with me as witnesses, and the police going in and finally getting my stuff. And I was like, thank God I dodged that crazy bullet. Only to the next day, she calls me and goes, hey, what are you doing? I'm sorry about that. And I was like, no, you don't screw with crazy. Okay. Now, and Shanice, she's not hot. She's not as physically attractive as Marcy, but she's a better match for Buck. We've talked about Buck. Buck's not a model. Buck is an average looking middle-aged man, but she's loyal. She has supported Buck for over 8 years. You say that she's trying to change him, but I think it's love. She's tolerated him. She's tolerated what he's done and never once tried to make him do something he didn't want to. Only she wanted to help him out. So I think you have to go with Shanice.
I want to move on to another weakness of this movie to justify my surprise wipe score. At several points in this movie, John Candy tries to make Buck menacing. He's like holding a hatchet, he's got a drill or something, or he's just like talking about killing and he's trying to do crazy face. They add in some theremin, and we're supposed to buy that kids are spooked by this chubby man in a beater car who talks way too much to be scary. You know who's scary? Jim Carrey is scary. Dennis Hopper is scary. Even Paul Rubens, like Pee Wee Herman, he could be scary in the right light. The scariest John Candy ever was in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles when he like dressed up as the devil. He's not scary at all. And for a man of his size, he should be able to pull off menacing. They never should have gone down this road. Find other ways for him to deal with these issues, because trying to spook people, it's not working.
See, but you're wrong. And this is, I think, due to your lack of experience with children. Buck doesn't need to be scary to effectively intimidate kids. He only needs to be unpredictable. You see, because kids, they're used to adults fitting into some like narrow band of the way that they act. Adult things, adult people say this. Buck breaks just those norms. So the kids are already like, what the hell is he talking about? He never lets them get a footing to where they feel stable. You know, they don't know how to respond to Buck. And Buck, you're saying that, you know, oh, he's not menacing. He tied up a teenage child, shoved that child into the back of his car. So these are not empty threats.
But what a letdown. He tapes the kid up. He's got him in the trunk, and then he just lets him go. And I'm like, that kid didn't learn shit.
Of course he did.
I'm just saying this is the second time that the movie has set something up. You got Pooter the Clown. Now you got Bug in the trunk. And they just lost the thread. There could have been something cool that happened there. Hitting him with a golf ball, big wow.
Well, Buck stopped the date rape. You know, Buck stopped an assault. So we don't know what Buck did in that room to get him out of the room and out of the party. But there was obviously something traumatic that Bug now breaks from his persona of the beret wearing, you know, high school elite to be like, I'm going to tell my daddy. So it was traumatic enough that I think he will think twice about touching a girl when she says, I want to go home.
At home, Tia helps Buck reconcile with Shanice by admitting her lie and tells Shanice that Buck would be a good husband and father. Buck also agrees to start his job at the garage, and he and Shanice reunite. Cindy's father recovers, and she and Bob return home from Indianapolis. Upon entering the house, Tia surprises her mother with a hug. The entire Russell family says farewell to Buck and Shanice as they leave for Chicago, with Buck and Tia exchanging a loving wave. Goodbye. I'm sorry. I have huge issues with this ending. Buck spends 1 week in his brother's boring ass shoes and decides, well, this is the life for me. After about age 17, I decided I wasn't getting married and I never wanted children. Now, 42, both prospects sound pretty sweet, but that does not mean that suburban bliss and calling Sarah honey are for me. I wish Buck had retained his own identity. He was a cool dude and they fucking neutered him at the end of this movie.
No, Gene, you're missing the pivotal moment in the film that is the turn. Buck is drinking. He's on the couch. He's got the dog. He's drunk. And he's talking about, Buck, you got the best life. You got no office. You got no responsibility. You got no girlfriend. And he goes, then all of a sudden people stop saying that. And he's reflecting and he's introspective. And he's realized that he isn't that man. The people who respected that are not someone he wants to be. And he's made that decision to change his life there.
If he had a podcast, that never would have happened. They would just be like, keep watching 80s and 90s movies and TV and hang out with your friends and talk on the Twitch and the Twitters.
Yeah, on the Twitch. But this would not be a John Hughes film if we did not get the mandatory montage, and a very special one that I'm going to talk about here is that how many 80s and 90s films where, you know, people destroy a home, there could be a party, there could be risky business where the pimp comes in and steals the glass egg. How many times do we see the montage of the kids running around in time lapse? They got the mops out. It could be don't tell mom the babysitter's dead. They're cleaning the house. They're repairing the damage, you know, and just as mom and dad, we see them driving. Hey, I wonder what the kids are doing. And they pull in and the camera cuts to everybody just, sitting on the couch like the Simpsons and the house is put together. We didn't get that. And I was very thankful. Instead, the movie focused on the emotional improvements and the personal growth that everybody had made than focusing on this comical turn of cleaning the house.
You forget there's always like the couch slides just as the butt's about to sit down, or they're talking to their parent and they got to like grab that one last thing and put it right behind their back. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Cindy comes in and notices one thing out of place, like going over and finding the cracked plate that's been glued back together and being like, what happened here, kids?
Yes, it's the plate callback from the first time he's in the house.
Yep.
Bingo. We've watched way too many fucking movies. But it's still a very John Hughes ending. Even without that montage, there's the music. the timid wave, the connection between like the two disparate souls that now have an understanding. Normally, I don't mind this if it's the end of like The Breakfast Club, but for some reason in this one, it just felt so cliche. Like I felt so unsatisfied.
No, I mean, it's just like at the end, we talked about the comfort food. After you've got that moons over my hammy from Denny's at 5 a.m, you wake up the next morning, it's a little rougher coming out, but I think the taste and the sentimentality is there. I can't believe I'm liking this film. I don't know if it's because I have a child and I'm seeing the connection between maybe an adult man and a kid in need. That Tia is a disaster. Tia is on her way to being just the most miserable adult. And the fact that Buck can come in and give well-needed tough love, which Cindy and Bob obviously cannot do, it left me feeling that there was a positive opportunity for Tia to grow up to be a normal, loving person.
This is the father of the bride effect, man.
It is.
There needs to skew a certain way. If there's kids in danger from the Soviets or a father-daughter relationship, Big D's immediately taking a wipe off right there.
So true.
Speaking of which, now is the time in the podcast where we give our Shat score. The Shat score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is giant pancakes for your birthday. 5 wipes is an absolute disaster. It's discovering your brother's been microwaving his giant-ass wet boxer shorts in your kitchenware. Big D, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Uncle Buck?
So I'm going to take off the mandatory 1 wipe for sentimentality between a father and daughter. I think it's a 2-wipe film. I think it's better than average. I think Buck is supportive. I think he's intuitive when it comes to the kids. He finds out what they need. Sometimes it's tough love. Sometimes it's a hug. I think the message behind it is like a lot of John Candy movies we've realized recently. There is a heart. His character, there is a struggle, whether it's Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, or even The Great Outdoors. All of his characters have something very special about them. And I think this film is not great. It's not one of Hughes' best. It's not one of Candy's best, but it's definitely better than average. So I'm going to give it 2 wipes.
All right, that's 2 wipes from Big D. Every John Hughes movie has some element that bugs me. But at least the teen movies that he did had like a dose of high school romance. And that goes a long way with me. It gives him a special glow. This movie doesn't have that. Nor does it have some of the clever moments that made movies like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles work. Uncle Buck is it's a mishmash of the weakest John Hughes elements. And it reveals some of the holes in John Candy's capabilities. People in the chat have been talking about movies like Harry Crumb, talking about movies like Nothing But Trouble. I think in those movies, you see what he's capable of. I think that Uncle Buck might be some of his worst work. And unfortunately, he is the big star. This hurts me to say because I love this movie as a child, but this is a 4-wipe shit show for me. So
it's okay. When Gene, one day when you have baby Gene, or you have what is a Persian girl's name? What's a popular one?
Zakia. Oh, a popular one or one that I like?
Yes. No, a popular one.
Dadia.
When Dadia comes in and she's had a rough day at school, and you go in and you scare the shit out of whoever it was at school as an adult, and you protect her and she gives you a hug, you'll be like, Big D was right. That's what you're going to think of. At that very moment, you're going to think back to today and you're going to say, Big D was right. I'm going to text him.
I'm going to call you
I'll
up.
Accept your apology.
I'm going to call you and say, do we still have that domain, shatpod.com? Can I go back and adjust my score?
I'll do it for you. Yeah.
And then we'll be getting to Porcupine Dude's commission of Who's Harry Crumb. It'll be 2027. All right. Well, 4 wipes from me and 2 wipes from Big D. That gives us an easy average score of 3 wipes for Uncle Buck.
Well, Gene, with a wipe score of 3, that now ties this in the 209 spot with a bunch of movies. Christmas Vacation, Commando, Revenge of the Nerds, Blade Runner. It's always there. It's always there. The Boondock Saints, Over the Top, Grease 2, Mortal Kombat, Red Dawn, Adventure, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Smokey and the Bandit, and Dark City.
For anybody who has a problem with this being tied with Blade Runner, know that that's Big D's fault. Because
no, it's not.
Had he gone lower, this movie would have been worse than Blade Runner.
Oh, no. But I've admitted Blade Runner is one of my flaws. It's one of my mistakes in life. I want to go back and fix it.
All right. Well, speaking of which, Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Gene, next week, after saving New York City from a ghost attack, a team of spiritual exterminators are disbanded for demolishing part of the city during the battle. But when I don't want to use that word,
Peter.
But when
say his
Peter,
name. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes. But when Peter Venkman learns that the spirit has taken an interest in his son, the men launch a rogue ghost chasing mission. The quest quickly goes awry, landing them in court. But when the ghosts turn on the judge, he issues an order allowing the team to get back to work. Commissioned by Matthew P., released in '89, and this will be episode 300 for Shat The Movies.
It's the sequel to The Team 2 by Ivan Reitman. Well, thank you, Matthew P., for commissioning our upcoming movie. And thank you to everybody who attended this live stream for helping us get past our goal for Uncle Buck. We have raised $346 for the July 4th Highland Park Shooting Response Fund. If you would like to contribute, you can go straight to their website. Just Google July 4th Highland Park Shooting Response Fund and go ahead and donate directly to them. Carlos just dropped a donation of $654
What?
to the Highland Park Shooting Response Fund, taking us to an even $1,000 donation to the Shooting Response Fund, and also 666% of our goal. 666. Thank you, Carlos, so much.
Amazing.
That is a great way to celebrate our 300th review coming up. And of course, Carlos, we have the month of Carlos coming up in 2023. We really, really appreciate your generosity. Thank you to everybody who joined us live. Thank you, Big D, for being with us during a hurricane. It's the first time we've ever done this.
We've made it. We could still lose power, but everybody out there, cross your fingers. We'll know here in a couple hours. I already lost part of my fence, so I had to chase it down the street and get it. So we'll see. Fingers crossed, the roof will be on my home tomorrow.
Well, we send our love to the people of Highland Park. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. That concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat The Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all the information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, remember that we'll be back here on Twitch for another live recording. That'll be October 9th. For First Blood, also known as Rambo First Blood. Yes. That's going to be a fun one. Ash will be joining us for that one. So it'll be the full cast on here. So please join us for that one. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Ash, and the King B, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
At the stroke of midnight, on New Year's Eve of the last decade of the 20th century, America's largest city is about to pay for the nastiness of its inhabitants. When that day comes, when the slime starts to rise,
the Titanic just arrived.
When ghosts start arriving by the boatload,
We gotta find the guys.
there's only one thing to do.
Sometimes weird things happen. Someone has to deal with it. And who are you gonna call? All right, suck in the guts, guys. We're the Ghostbusters.
The superstars of the supernatural are back to nuke the spooks.
2 in the box.
Ready to go.
We be fast and
They be slow.
Make some time.
Don't put any of those old cheap moves on me.
No.
It's different.
I have all new cheap moves.
Raise your spirits.
If we don't do something by midnight, you will be remembered in history as the man who let New York get sucked down into the 10th level of hell.
And kick some slime.
Looks like a giant Jell-O mold.
I hate Jell-O.
Oh, come on. There's always room for Jell-O.
Happy New Year.
Bosom.
Ghostbusters 2.
You're short, your belly button sticks out too far, and you're a terrible burden on your poor mother.
Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Sigourney Weaver, Harold Ramis, Rick Moranis, and Ernie Hudson in an Ivan Reitman film. Ghostbusters 2.
We're the best! We're the beautiful! We're the only Ghostbusters! We're back!